The sound of frantic barking echoed across the riverbank, followed by the splashing of water. I could barely make out the dog's silhouette struggling against the swift current, its desperate yelp sending a chill down my spine. My heart raced as I realized the situation was dire. The dog was drowning, and it needed help immediately. Without a second thought, I sprinted toward the water, adrenaline coursing through my veins. But just as I was about to dive in, I heard the unmistakable sound of a helicopter's rotor blades slicing through the air. I looked up and saw the rescue team's massive chopper descending toward the river, ready to save the day. But little did I know what happened next would leave me speechless. The river, normally calm and serene, had turned into a raging force that day. Dark clouds hung low in the sky, and the water churned as if it were alive. The dog, a small golden retriever, was caught in the middle of the current, its paws flailing helplessly as it was carried further downstream, its eyes locked with mine, pleading for help. I was no stranger to animals in need, but this was different. The situation was life-threatening, and I knew I couldn't save the dog alone. That's when the rescue team arrived. The helicopter, a massive machine that seemed to fill the sky, hovered above us. The team, highly trained and equipped for these kinds of rescues, was already preparing to dive in. But even with their help, the river was unforgiving. The current was too strong and the dog was too far out. As the helicopter lowered a rescue swimmer into the water, I watched in disbelief. This was going to be a race against time. The helicopter's spotlight illuminated the river as the rescue swimmer, expertly harnessed, plunged into the water. The wind howled as the chopper hovered above, its blades creating a deafening roar. The swimmer reached the dog just as it was being pulled under the water again, gasping for air. The tension was unbearable. Would they reach it in time? I could see the swimmer's hand grab the dog, pulling it toward him with all his strength. The dog, exhausted and near lifeless, barely moved. My heart sank. Was it too late? But then, just as the swimmer was about to make his way back to the helicopter, something incredible happened. The dog, with a burst of energy, began to paddle weakly. It wasn't giving up. Neither was the rescue team. With one final effort, the swimmer and the dog were hoisted back into the helicopter. The team's cheers echoed through the night air as the helicopter ascended, carrying the dog to safety. The dog, though saved, seemed different now. It wasn't just exhausted, it was acting strangely. Its eyes darted around, scanning the surroundings, as if searching for something or someone. The rescue team, now back at base, began to examine the dog. That's when they noticed something unusual. A small old tag around its neck, worn from years of wear and tear. The tag was partially covered in mud, but the markings were still visible. It read, "Property of the Riverstone Manor." I had never heard of Riverstone Manor, but the name sounded familiar. The team was equally puzzled. Why would a dog from a mansion end up in the middle of a river, struggling for its life? The dog's behavior grew more erratic as it paced back and forth, as though it wanted to go somewhere. The rescue team decided to follow its lead. They were about to uncover something far bigger than they ever imagined. Following the dog's strange behavior, the rescue team and I ventured to the Riverstone Manor, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of town. As we approached the grand gates, something felt off. The dog had stopped, staring at the mansion's front door, its body tense with anticipation. The air inside Riverstone Manor was thick with dust and the weight of forgotten memories. The journal in my hands trembled slightly as I turned the brittle pages. The ink faded but still legible. Mrs. Westbrook sat beside me, her frail hands clasped together, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Max, the dog who had defied time itself, lay at her feet, his ears perked as if he too was listening to the secrets unfolding before us. The entries in the journal spoke of a betrayal that had torn the Westbrook family apart. Decades ago, Mrs. Westbrook's husband Charles had been accused of embezzling the family fortune. The accusations led to his disgrace, and he vanished soon after, leaving behind whispers of deceit and a legacy tainted by scandal. But as I read further, a different story emerged that suggested Charles had been framed. Max whimpered suddenly, his nose nudging the corner of the journal. I followed his lead, flipping to the final entry. It was dated the night Charles disappeared. The words were hurried, almost frantic. "I have hidden the truth where only the loyal will find it. The ledger holds the answers. Trust Max." A chill ran down my spine. The ledger. Could it be here? Still waiting to clear Charles's name after all these years? Determined, we followed Max's lead once more. He guided us through the grand hall, past ornate portraits of ancestors long gone, until we reached the study. The room smelled of aged paper and polished wood, its shelves lined with books that had not been touched in years. Max stopped in front of the grand fireplace, his tail wagging slightly as he pawed at the base. Mrs. Westbrook gasped. "That was Charles's favorite spot," she whispered. "He used to sit there for hours reading." With renewed urgency, I examined the fireplace. Running my hands along the edges of the stone, I felt a slight indentation. Pressing it gently, there was a soft click. A hidden compartment swung open, revealing an old leather-bound ledger. Heart-pounding, I opened it. The pages were filled with records, numbers, and signatures, evidence that proved Charles had not stolen the fortune, but rather had been set up by his own brother in a desperate attempt to claim the inheritance. Mrs. Westbrook's breath hitched as she took in the truth. "All these years, he was innocent," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "And Max? He never stopped trying to bring him justice." The revelation was staggering, but the mystery was not over yet. The final page of the ledger contained a cryptic message. "The fortune remains where love was lost." Max let out a low bark, his gaze shifting toward the grand staircase. We exchanged glances, understanding dawning upon us. There was more to uncover, and Max was leading us to the final piece of the puzzle. Little did we know, what we were about to find would change the history of Riverstone Manor forever. We ascended the staircase, each step creaking beneath our weight. The dim chandelier overhead cast long shadows along the corridor, making the grand house feel even more eerie. Max stopped abruptly in front of an old wooden door at the end of the hallway. His tail wagged anxiously, and he let out a low growl. Mrs. Westbrook hesitated before pushing the door open. Inside, the room was untouched by time, a bedroom preserved in the memory of someone long gone. A portrait of a young woman hung above the fireplace, her eyes sorrowful yet captivating. "Eleanor," Mrs. Westbrook whispered. "Charles's first love." My fingers traced the edges of the portrait frame, and with a soft click, it shifted slightly. Behind it was a small alcove containing a metal box, locked tight. I pried it open, revealing stacks of old letters, a golden locket, and a final note from Charles himself. "To my beloved Eleanor, I could never leave without you. If you have found this, you know the truth. The fortune was never mine to take, it was always meant for you. Find me where our love began." Mrs. Westbrook clutched the locket, tears welling in her eyes. "He never abandoned us. He was searching for Eleanor all along." Max barked once more, signaling that our journey was not yet over. The final clue had been revealed, and now we had to follow Charles's trail to where his love story first began. Only then would the true mystery of Riverstone Manor be solved.